Widening social rifts define our era, driven by indignant anger and manipulation through engineered fear and division. To move forward and heal, we need secure men and strong women. But more importantly, we must learn how to listen to each other. As I asked women around me how I could help, I started to understand that the idea I once considered a conclusion was only the beginning.
Women want to be heard, but it's not enough yet. So don't just hear us, but hear us when we say that everything that's happening is not enough to treat us as fully valuable, fully worthy human beings, equal in every way to men.
A unified answer that branches out into infinite diversity, with one common factor. The people not listening tend to be men.
But women cannot make men listen, and certainly cannot integrate what they hear into understanding and action. Only men can do that for themselves.
So if men can't listen to women, LGBTQ+, minority groups, or other people with different perspectives, maybe they can listen to a man having a conversation with these people. I'm inviting you into my journey to become a better listener and meet some intriguing people along the way. Hello and welcome to the If Men Can't Listen To podcast, this time with only one guest, no 3D printer humming in the background. My apologies to everybody on that last episode about that one. My guest is Jen, and unfortunately I'm kind of losing my voice a little bit, so I think I'm going to let her do all the talking. I did a whole bunch of training at work today, and my voice is pretty roasted, so I'd like to pre-apologize for all the squeaks and pops. But I'm going to let Jen talk a little bit about herself.
Well, hi, Shane. Thanks so much for having me here. My name's Jen OC, Jen Oborne Crolly, and I live in Winnipeg, Manitoba, in Canada. And I'm here because a couple of people sent me your call out that you did inviting people to put their name forward for your podcast. And I've learned that the best way to do things is by invitation and listening and following. So when I watched your post with the invitation, it actually really, I felt something in my heart. So I thought, okay, I'm going to reach out to this guy.
So after receiving these different prompts to go check me out and check out this project, what did you think when you saw it?
Well, I was so intrigued and honestly really pleased to hear a man interested in holding space for women's voices, for, the voices of people of color, LGBTQS plus individuals. And I just thought what a refreshing thing, but also how timely for where our world is and where I feel our world is going. And it just made my heart smile to hear a man wanting to hold that space.
And I think for myself too, on a selfish level, I enjoy newness. I enjoy learning things that I don't know. And in welcoming in all these different perspectives, I feel like that kind of introduces me to that place of newness, and helps me grow as a person. And if I do this as a podcast, there's the benefit of maybe helping some other people see how to do that too. So I'm glad this is resonating.
Yeah, I've really loved it. And I've listened to all of them. I realized there was a new one just on my way home. So I haven't heard that one yet. But I've really appreciated the people that you've had on and the things that I've learned about their perspectives. And I've loved the conversational quality to what you're doing. And just thank you for doing this and bringing these voices forward. And, I've heard from a number of these voices that sense of not really belonging in various ways. And that also really resonates with me too.
Yeah. And the great thing about like this international community of the internet is that these people with so many different things are starting to realize, I feel, and I can't speak for everybody, but I'm starting to see that people are realizing that there's more of us weirdos who would be otherwise considered misfits. It's just that we've been kind of pushed down by society. And part of this awakening, part of this reason why there's so many people living their authentic life in a way that they would have hidden for decades, if not their whole life, is that they were made to feel like they just wouldn't fit in, like they would be outcast from society. And I think that's just so great that now that we can all turn the lights on and see where each other are, I think that a lot more people are going to feel safe to be themselves. And I really hope that's a trend that, you know, currently there's some, to say the least, unpleasantness and pushback on that. But I feel like there's space for that to, if we get through this in one piece, to keep pushing through this extinction burst of repression, I guess would be the word I'd use for it, and letting people like live vividly. I feel like we're in the moment where the Wicked Witch in The Wizard of Oz is being super intimidating, I should say, and the house is going to drop soon, and we're going to see the world change to full color. You know, at least that's what I'm crossing my fingers and hoping for. If we all manage to do the work we need to do to make that happen.
Well, I think that all these gifts that are under the surface are exactly the things that our world needs right now. Right? You know, the status quo of things has brought us to this place where we're, you know, the climate issues, the poverty issues, the inequality issues, the polarity issues that we're seeing, you know, here in Canada. We see what's going on with you guys. Like, we consume a whole lot of your news and stories and what's going on, and we've got our own too, right? We can walk that polarity thing pretty good over here as well. And I'm actually really pleased with where we've come out election wise just recently.
Yeah, I was paying attention to that when I spend a lot of time in Canada for work, and it is really eye-opening to find out just how much of a polarized society you guys are in at the moment as well. It's not just us and us people who like to call ourselves Americans and don't realize there's so many other. We've got North America and South America, and every single one of those people in North and South America is Americans, but we call dibs on the name. So,
right.
People from the United States,
yeah,
look inward a lot, and they don't see the subtlety that's in the world right around them outside of our borders. And when I travel up there, it's interesting, depending on where you go, even down to not just the province, but like, I'm sorry, I'm speaking to a Canadian, so it'd be province. Gotta get my pronunciation right.
You were right the first time.
Well, it depends. Like in Manitoba, it's a different accent than Toronto. And then you go a little further over into Quebec, and I got to say, there's very few things that actually scare me in life, and French Canadians scare the hell out of me.
Provence.
So it's weird. Like there's such that it's almost like you're going into different countries, not different provinces of the same country. Like even like the difference between New Brunswick and Nova Scotia, and they're right next to each other. They might as well be different worlds. And I don't know, I'm just glad I got a chance to travel. I think the only place I haven't been is Alberta and like the Northern Territories.
Okay. Well, they're both beautiful. I haven't been to the Northern Territories, but Alberta is beautiful.
Yes.
And I know people up in the Northwest Territories. So.
Yeah, that's some hardy people that can live up there.
Yeah, very true. Very true. My husband, he grew up north, about 9 hours north of where I am. And my husband and I, we were dating, and it was minus 40 in Winnipeg, which I don't even know what that is for you guys.
No, is this in Celsius or is this in Fahrenheit?
No, that's in Celsius.
Okay, so that's fairly cold.
It's good and cold. And anyway, where he was up in Thompson, it was minus 60.
Now, I'm going to pull up the Fahrenheit conversion here once it decides to load.
Please do.
Because I'm curious about this now. So you said negative 40.
Minus 40.
Because this, like, it's weird because I go to Canada, right?
Yeah.
And there's no consensus that I can see as to what measurement system you guys use. And it seems to be like on a case-by-case basis, right?
Oh, it totally is.
And it's interesting because I wish that we use the metric system here. Technically, we do, but it's all converted. Like the United States is so damn stubborn that we are on the metric system officially, but nobody uses it.
Oh, funny.
So let's see, 40 in Fahrenheit. Oh, negative 40. I can't do math.
It's okay.
Oh, this one's easy. Negative 40.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know what minus 60 is then. You can look that one up.
Yeah, so that's the crossover point, is negative 40, and that's pretty cold. In Minnesota, it does get to negative 60 Fahrenheit. So let's find out. I know we're having a really good podcast discussion just doing math. That's negative 76 Fahrenheit for people in the United States. And I want to say Liberia. There's literally 2 countries that still use this system, and we're unfortunately one of them. So for all of you out there who use Fahrenheit still, that would be negative 76. That is really cold. Like, I think the coldest it gets here, like we are near neighbors. I'm in Minnesota, you're in Winnipeg, and that's about a 6-7 hour drive.
Yeah.
And another 9 hours north, you're saying it gets even that colder. So
yeah, we use metric for temperature and for distance and for some kinds of weight, but not talking about your own weight. And we use imperial for how tall we are.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
So, well, it's sorry, we got way off track on a weird like Canadian and United States difference tangent, which I'm sure there's going to be more of them, like how your fast food is vastly superior.
Oh God, that's terrible.
Oh, I get off the plane and I immediately find the first Harvey's I can. And then after that, it's all Middle Eastern food if I'm in Toronto, but other places, it just depends. But like the first stop is a Harvey's and usually an A&W, because your A&W is a whole different company up there and it actually tastes like food. Ours is mostly food-shaped grease and salt.
God, yuck.
Yes. So anyways, so you and your husband were dating. And we were talking about temperature. I'm just trying to like throw breadcrumbs down to figure out where we were.
Yeah, just as super cold. That's
okay.
A good story about the cold.
Well, leave it to people in our region of the world to sit and talk about the cold for a good 10 minutes straight.
Right. But here it's a dry cold, so that's not too bad.
Right. So we were kind of introduced through that form, and I know very little about you, and I know through your work, there's a little bit I know, and I'm actually kind of curious about this. It seems like a sort of like a energy and body positivity kind of thing.
That's an interesting thing to call it, but basically, I do healing work. I've done healing work since I was 17 years old. Probably I met my first healing teacher at 17, another one at 24, and I stepped into using Body Talk, which is the system that I work with primarily now. And I've been receiving that work for about 20 years and offering and sharing that work for about 12. So it's a mind-body form of healthcare that uses listening to the body through yeses and nos with the arm to hear what the body is asking for, like what is the kind of balancing and healing possibilities that person is ready and available for. So it's very both intuitive work, so very right-brained, but it's also very structured. So it's also at the same time very left-brained. It's kind of a really lovely marrying of both ways of being, both kinds of thinking. And it's really helpful and really effective. I've found it really great for myself. And I've actually just spent 3 days at a retreat with Indigenous moms who've been getting supported in growing their mothering skills and their personal development. And they brought me in to do that healing work for those women for these last few days. And I'm actually just home as well, just like you. And I've just been in a place of absolute joy working with these ladies.
It's really awesome. Like there's a what is it? There's a saying, and it's a trope. Like it's super super overdone, but I feel like it's true. It's that if you enjoy what you do for a living, you never work a day in your life. And I'm happy that you found something that brought you joy like that. And then just a quick follow up question based on. So is this? Because I know a lot of Western medicine will look at different parts of the body as their own unique thing, and very rarely are you going to see people look at the mind and the body in the same way. Is this inspired by the indigenous peoples, or is this something that just happened to kind of vibe with what they're doing?
Yeah, not inspired by indigenous people. This system came over from a man by the name of John Veltheim, who lived in Australia, came to the US, launched it from there. And he had quite a varied background in complementary type medicine, Chinese medicine, chiropractic, meditation, Eastern philosophies, and kind of brought them together through one system. So it's a very flexible system that we can work in all kinds of ways. And pretty well, if you can imagine something being a need, there would be a way in this system to be helpful.
Very cool. And my apologies for essentially sending you right back to work after you were done. What is the Jen that exists outside of your work?
Well, you said something before we hit record that you're more than the work that you do. For all of us, our lives get centered on certain things, right? For some people, their life is centered on their family, or it's centered on their community, or it's centered on learning or teaching or sharing or whatever. My life very much is centered in that work piece. And it's because the work that I do it's the whole reason why I'm here. And I don't mean body talk specifically, but some of us are just meant to come here to be helpers. Some of us are meant to be able to bring healing capacities to people. And the biggest joy in my life really is that that's the stuff that I get to do pretty much on the daily at this point in my life. Like, I'm 55 years old. I left a career in education to walk this path. Yet I was walking it when I was 17 years old, and I've waited my whole life to be at this point where this is what I do on the daily. Before really my life opening up this way, I was living a life, where I was an educator. I was a student services teacher. So I was doing, healing, counseling type work with kids and families. So, close, but not kind of close enough. And I just hit a place where I couldn't do both things and had to make a choice. And my heart was like, there's lots of people who can be educators, lots of people who can, do guidance counseling, whatever. There's not many people who can do that healing work. And I've been growing myself, like I said, since I was 17 that way. And I've been waiting my whole life to live in a world where I exist. And a big piece of the story of getting here really has been stepping into and making relationship with Indigenous community, because in that world, healers exist. So I walked my whole life. Well, I say my whole life, drama, wah. Till I was 17 years old, I never met anybody who talked like how I thought, or showed me how I felt, or said, "Oh yes, you've got a gift. Come sit with us. Let's help grow your intuition." She was not Indigenous, but when I was, 30-ish, 33, I'd had a dream that had sat with me for 6 months. And one of my closest friends married into the Indigenous ceremonial community. And she said, "Hey, Jen, you've been talking about this dream for 6 months. Maybe you should take it to an elder and ask about it." And this man looked at me and he said, "So who are you?" And I was like, "Well, I'm Jen." "Well, no, who are you?" And, I'd walked, poked my feet a little in that community, and I'd been given a name, in that way, a spirit name. So I said, "Well, I'm also this. Is that what you're talking about?" And he said, no, this dream says that you're with us in ceremony in 10 days. So who are you? And it was quite a surprising thing, but he said to me, you're a healer and we need healers all the time. Come on in and come sit with us. And there's a gift you're supposed to receive. We're going to make sure that you get it. And that was 23 years ago. And the biggest joy in my life, has been living this life as a healer, because like I said, in the Western world, healers really don't exist. And so I didn't have a place before, and I very much have a place, and it's wonderful.
And I don't want to skip past something, because you said something earlier on, and if you ever see me looking over this way and typing something, I have a lot of screens in front of me during this podcast, but one of them is a note screen that I've learned not to use paper because it gets picked up on the microphone quite a bit. Anyway, so I made myself a note because I didn't want to skip past this. You said, I want to live in a world where I exist. Yeah. And I feel that's a powerful thought. And I think a lot of people don't have that thought, and that follow-up, who are you, that question, I feel like so many people can't answer that. So many people haven't even considered that as a question. Oh, I'm me. Well, who is that? And I feel like I'm trying to put together the metaphor here in my head. You know that game where you put a card on your head or a Post-it note that says something and you have to talk to other people to figure out who it is? Yeah. I feel like we're all doing that with ourselves, and we're trying to meet ourselves, but so many people don't realize they should be looking for themselves. And I feel like that's a lifelong journey to meet oneself. And I feel like now at 45, I am just starting to be able to answer that question. So I like that question. I really do. Who are you? Not like your name, but like, who are you? Why are you here? Why are you doing the things you're doing?
See, when I was 4, I knew who I was. I remember people saying to me, "Oh, Jen, what are you going to be when you grow up?" And inside, I would be like, "Well, it's right in the center of a triangle that's between being a teacher and a doctor and a psychologist. Someone who can sit with people and see who they really are on the inside and be able to draw it out and show it to them." But I couldn't express that as a 4-year-old, and I didn't have people around me who could reflect, "Oh, hey, there's some qualities this girl has." And so I just said, I want to be an archaeologist. Because to me, that was like the next closest thing, excavating and finding whole new worlds or old worlds.
I feel like, too, there's a drive, once we get closer to adulthood, to fit us into these predefined boxes. Well, what one of these are you? And I feel that does us a great disservice, because so many people waste a decade or two until they realize they're not neatly in one of those boxes. And who they are isn't a function of what you want to do as a profession. Who you are, I think, can fit into a profession or make you more adept at a profession. But I think who you are is more of a spiritual question, Well, and I think you bring it wherever you go. Right. Like, I could have worked at 7-Eleven. I don't know if you guys have 7-Eleven in the States. Here's the thing. We are one of the only states in the entire country that does not have 7-Eleven because of a weird little fight they had with a now defunct store called Tom Thumb. And we had Tom Thumbs instead of 7-Elevens. And 7-Eleven has bought into another company here, Speedway, which owns long story short, 7-Eleven is here, but not in name. And we are like one of the only states that doesn't have them. Okay. We even had Tim Hortons for a while, and now we don't have that either.
Okay. Well, one of the things that kind of defines Winnipeggers, because Winnipeg is like the Slurpee capital of the world or something like that.
I did not know that.
Well, yeah, we'll actually go out when it's -35 or -40, and we'll walk to 7-Eleven and get a Slurpee and come home. like it's not cold enough.
My kids and I have a tradition of getting Dairy Queen blizzards in blizzards.
Yeah, that's like exactly the same. Anyway, I could be someone who works at 7-Eleven and would become the person that people come and share their problems to at 7-Eleven. You know what I mean? Like we bring who we are wherever we go.
That's true.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's weird that we find out so late in adulthood, like that question. This, like, you've really struck a nerve with me, I guess. I'm kind of stuck on this thought, like, who are you? And I'm almost wondering if I should add that to the list of icebreaker questions that I gave you. Like, who are you? Like, that's kind of a mind-blowing, simple question that it sounds like it stopped you dead in your tracks when you were asking. I'm kind of like now stuck in my, like, who am I? Like, and I realize I don't even know. Like, I know more who I am now than I ever have in my life, but I don't know who I am. And I'm hoping to figure that out before it's time for me to check out of this world.
I think it's a wonderful gift to notice that curiosity and start following it. You know, to have that hunger to know who you are. I used to say to kids, like I used to, counsel kids at school, and we would talk about, who are you and what do you think you're here for? And they'd be like, I don't know. And I would say to them, well, what makes your heart do this? And I'd flutter my fingers at my heart and go, what makes you feel like that? What lights you up? And sometimes it would be as simple as, well, just going on the swing. Okay, go on the swing and feel that joy. And then that'll probably open the door to another thing that makes you feel like that, and then follow that. So I've kind of led my life with that for a long time. And probably some people would feel that I've made some dumb decisions, because I've followed what does my heart crave, ache for, what lights me up, and followed that. And, I left a 15-year, seniority in my school division and a promise of a pension and regular income. It's work to make it out there as a healer, or as something that doesn't really exist in a lot of people's perspective. But, I've had this most fascinating journey just these last 4 months. A close friend and someone I've done healing work with for a number of years has been dealing with breast cancer. And she's a very sensitive type, physically sensitive to things. And, the first time she had her treatment, her blood levels just cratered to the point that it put at risk whether or not she could have her next one, and then the ones after that. And she was under an aggressive course. And in just a few sessions, we were able to get those blood levels. The certain one was supposed to go up 75% in 4 days for her to get the next treatment. And it went up like 590%. And her numbers have been stable throughout. And I'm so grateful. She's taught me so much about how to walk with someone in that kind of depth and process. But the things that are possible, if you live in a world where such things exist, can be pretty amazing.
And I really want to come back to something that you said there, and I'm kind of leaving these breadcrumbs to come back to it, because I think we kind of skip past something. One of the things that I'm kind of struggling with myself over the last 10 years is the realization that a lot of success is defined monetarily, and that's not necessarily true in terms of humanity. And what would you consider success? Because I think, the financial end of it is just one very, very narrow slice of the pie.
Yep. It's a meaningful one, though. Like, it is a meaningful one. To me, every single time that a person has experienced change or greater peace greater peace with themselves or greater peace with something out there that has been distressing to them. Whenever people have experienced a change in how their body feels or how their body works, there's a few people that are walking this earth who wouldn't be if we hadn't sat down together at, key moments. And I'm excited for that. There are families who've invited me to sing for their grandmother when she passed, because of the journey we've walked together. So it's both the changes that become possible, but it's also the depth of relationship that happens. Mm-hmm. It's really something to sit with someone and see their beauty and be able to support them in also seeing that. And not just their beauty, but their innate goodness. And that's a piece that I think that so many of us in this world, we don't know our innate goodness. We can be so stressed about the littlest things, as though those little things make us this big failure or wrong or bad or whatever. When we've got the foundation of our basic goodness, the world's a different place, kinder, safer.
And I think I'd like to kind of use that as a bridge to another topic. So much of who we are and our self-worth is so external. And that's just, we're social animals. It's kind of how it is. But at the same time, it almost feels like a superpower to be able to have that sense of self-worth come from within. And I think that's where a place of true happiness happens. Yeah, but agreed. A lot of the downside to all the goodness of being able to everyone communicate with each other is that we've created a culture of comparison, and especially when it comes to masculinity. And I've used the term, instead of toxic masculinity, competitive masculinity, because I feel that's, yes, the toxicity is there, but I feel like that's the byproduct of this need to constantly run around begging men, like men begging other men for permission to be a man. And it's so, for me, it's such a pillar of weakness. It is an identifier. It is an absolute admission of weakness when you have to ask another man if you're a man. But at the same time, that's the universal accepted standard within our society is, do other men think you're manly? And I know you had said you might have some thoughts on the concept of masculinity and femininity based on those icebreaker questions I sent you earlier. Yeah.
Well, and a lot of that really comes from, again, that experience walking in ceremony community, walking in that Indigenous world, because I'm not Indigenous. I'm a settler. I come from a long line of settlers. I shared before we hit record, my grandpa is from Sweden. All my ancestors have come from other places, some quite a long time ago, but still from other places. And when I stepped into that Indigenous world and was received, which was just so shocking, really. But I very quickly found not only a comfort there, but a purpose. And also, I actually knew the lay of the land, which I really didn't. But I think that the way of being in that world was so different from my everyday life, Western, patriarchal, masculine, European-based culture, that's what I come from. And I could never function in that world. So I came to really get some perspective just from my own comparison, to use that word a different way, of what was here versus what had I grown up with, where sometimes I could even not even walk a straight line. I could fall off a dock in 4 feet of water and forget I could swim and, almost drown in those kinds of spaces. And I didn't understand that my way of being actually aligned with something else. So in my mind, I kind of equate masculine, Western, European, capitalistic, colonial, scientific, kind of in one box, and feminine, indigenous, land-based, intuitive-based, experiential, dream-based in another box. And from my experience, I really noticed, like, what's different here? Well, one thing that was different was that everybody mattered, right? That there was a place for even someone like me. You know, I remember a man, a man who kind of came from that more, competition comparison part, because I'd used the word healer with him, and he said, "Oh, healers, they're all their ego because they're all proud of themselves because blah blah blah. They can, so they're special somehow." And I was like, actually, I don't feel that way at all. I feel so amazed and overjoyed and grateful that there's a group of people in the circle of life that I get to stand with, because I hadn't known that experience before. So in that indigenous feminine, way, there's room for everyone in the circle. There's room for everyone in their kinds of gifts. There's an understanding of LGBTQS plus people in that indigenous worldview. There's an understanding of people who are atypical, neurodivergent. There's an understanding of people with autism in that worldview. And with all of them, they're seen as having special gifts that the community needs, right? So in that more masculine Western way, where are the spaces for those people, right? Our world, I really feel our world is calling for that feminine perspective, that feminine principle, to become at least an equal force. And that feminine's been rising for a long time, but there are problems that are created now in our masculine world that the masculine perspective doesn't actually have not only the answers for, but a worldview that can't have the answers, right? Everything is linear, logical, measured in that worldview. Just to give you some differences, right? Hierarchical in that masculine way, equitable in the feminine way, logical in the masculine, intuitive in the feminine, economic in the masculine, ecologic in the feminine, the personal on the masculine side, the whole on the feminine side, linear time on the masculine side, circular time or timelessness on the feminine side, visible and invisible, measurable and finite versus endless and infinite. So we actually need to solve the problems that the masculine world has created. We need the worldview that comes from that feminine way, because in this worldview, there is timelessness. Like, we have all the time in the world to do what we need to do if we're doing it from a certain way. It involves all of us. Like, there aren't enough doctors in the world for all the people that need medical support. There aren't enough therapists in the world for all the people that really need therapy, right? If you do the math of what's needed in the environment, the math doesn't work for us to be successful without absolutely everyone working towards it. And to bring everyone, we actually need that feminine uniting principle that galvanizes us together. Heart, mind, emotion, spirit, intention. And there's a story. It was one of the first stories that I heard about, in my late 20s, kind of stepping into community. And this woman talked about a river. I think it was in California, but I'm not sure. And I don't remember the details, but I remember the heart of it. And she said that there was this river that was really sick and polluted. And there was a group of people who committed themselves, over 15 years that they would be working towards cleaning and rehabilitating this river. And they figured it would take about 15 years. And all these people worked together, and the river really recovered in about 5 years, which didn't make sense for the math because it shouldn't be that way. And she said, but the part that can't be measured is, so what happens when a group of people bring their hearts, their intentions, their efforts toward a common goal is one thing. But she said, how does the river respond? What happens to the spirit of that water when it feels that care and love and presence and understanding of an issue and help to support change on the part of the river? And we all know what it's like to maybe be talking about our trauma or a problem or whatever. How is it different when there's someone who sits with us, who is present and really hears? The quality of that talk is different, and what happens from that talk is different. And that's like what happened with this river. And where I'm going with this is, when we bring a feminine way of being to the problems of our world, we actually bring these capacities that exist in a feminine worldview that can be instrumental in shifting what is in our everyday.
So this is interesting too, because I explored this concept before. I thought this, I kind of had an idea that this was going to be a podcast, but before this project really had a final, hey, this is what I'm going to do, I was kind of just holding space. The hold music, so to speak, for this podcast was writing poetry, and it wasn't great. It was just me processing things, right?
Yeah.
And I wrote this piece called Pink Fences, and it's really pretty deep in my account. So I wouldn't be surprised if you hadn't seen it. But it was the idea of men are doing ourselves a disservice from walling ourselves off from anything that might be considered feminine. And I feel like we're in such an echo chamber of competitive masculinity that we've made a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy until all the gray or all the color, everything is washed out, and it's just stark high contrast black and white. In this, I kind of hope we can pop this bubble and kind of wake up from this really rigid gender system, because I'm hearing a lot of benefit from the blurring and blending of these concepts, and I've kind of explored that with my own kids, in that that gender roles are ridiculous. You need to do what makes you happy and not be limited by what somebody said. Oh, boys can't do this, girls can't do this. Well, why not? Does it involve your genitals? No. Then why can't you do it? And even peeing your name in the snow can be done. We have the technology. There's literally no reason for any of these rigid gender roles to limit somebody.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of wondering, in these indigenous cultures, is it, because you have a lot more, I'm coming at this from a place of, I wouldn't say complete ignorance, but sizable ignorance.
Yeah.
In these native cultures, you started to talk a little bit about how that's not really, they're very familiar with things outside of the gender binary. And in your experience, is it more blended between masculine and feminine, or is that concept even kind of not necessarily rigidly defined?
Well, I from what I've observed, I think that even that concept has both existed and had to be reclaimed in Indigenous world, because colonization has had its put its mark. There's been a huge disruption to those, ancestral passing on of knowledge and worldview, a huge interruption through residential schools. So there's been quite a huge imposition of colonial worldview in as a very broad collective, upon Indigenous people. And that's, in Canada where I live, it's in the US where you live, and it's all over the world where there are Indigenous peoples and where people like my ancestors traveled to. So I think, like I said, there's been both an existence, but also the necessity for that reclamation. I don't know if I went all the way in your question or not.
No, I think you answered. It just made me, it made me like, I love these answers that make me think of more questions, and that's really, I feel like that's how, conversation gets driven forward. And like, I have my armchair quarterback theories about like what we need to do. Like the whole idea of this is to fix the men problem, not by telling me, men no, but to give them a better way, right? To expose them to new thoughts that we wall ourselves off from. Instead of just saying, hey, you're awful, it's like, hey, here's the answers. Like, women especially have been trying to give men the answers for millennia, and we kind of blow it off.
But here's another couple of questions. Hey, aren't you tired?
Yes.
Hey, how are you guys doing with all the pressure to know everything and be everything and tell everybody what to do? How are you doing with seeing the hard consequences? Of course, not that everything's bad, right? There's no absolutes, right? But I go back to a story, another story just from a couple of summers ago. And I was on a long 3-day drive with a family member, a male family member. And for weather conditions, we wanted to avoid an area so that we weren't driving on icy hills, making our way home. And he stayed up all night driving, and I'd been up all day and hadn't rested, kind of in between. Anyway, the further we got and the closer we got to home, even though we were still 10 hours away, he couldn't give up the wheel. And I was like, we need to stop. Can't we just stop? Can't we both just stop and rest? Because you're not actually driving the best. And the response was really, aggressive. No, I'm driving. Okay, well, and we got home, and honestly, it was really upsetting to me. It was actually scary. 2 years later, you know what he tells me? Well, I was responsible to get us home. I had to get us home safe. No, you didn't. There's no reason why we couldn't have stopped. Parked the car at the side of the road, had a nap for 2 hours, started again fresh. And I was like, why on earth would you feel that you have to do all that? Like, this can be shared, but also stopping is an option. And that's another masculine feminine dichotomy. Masculine is go, keep going. Feminine brings stop, rest.
I think there's an air of vulnerability to that too, and that's men don't know how to be vulnerable because they equate vulnerability with weakness. Being vulnerable all the time as a blanket statement, yeah, that can be a weakness, but knowing when and where and to who to be vulnerable to, I feel, is a huge strength.
Yep. Well, and if in a masculine way there's that competition, what's the benefit of vulnerability, right? You lose, this one wins now. Mm-hmm. But what if from a feminine way, that vulnerability was met with shared responsibility?
I have a similar story about my wife and I. We have some friends that live in a different state, and it's about 14 hours drive away. And we decided it would be a great idea to leave after work and just rock it down there. Why not? You know, I do a lot of driving for a living. It's not a big deal. I love to drive. But there was a point where we were like, it was getting late and we decided to switch off duties. And it was one of the most fun and exhausting things. By the time we got into the city where our friends live, we were switching every 30 minutes because we were so tired. And it would just be like, you start to go cross-eyed, and then you tap my wife, or my wife would tap me, and we'd switch. And we got there, and it was so dumb, but it was so fun at the same time. And what made it fun was that partnership, that equality of having a shared experience and not being like, well, it's all on me to do this. It was the idea that, like, having a partner, having a teammate is so much better and so much more fulfilling and so much more fun than having someone you're just dragging along with you and you insist on doing all the work. Like, there's no pride in that for me. Like, I don't have pride in the fact that I'm the one who has to do everything. I love it when my wife and I are doing things as true partners, because we get to share that experience and we bring that experience to something that's better than the sum of our parts. Like, it's so much more of a rich experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, the opposite of patriarchy isn't actually matriarchy. Yeah, but matriarchy isn't about, well, now we're in charge in the hierarchy and we're at the top and you're at the bottom. It's actually, okay, so how can we all do things together? How can we all take turns being on and take turns being off? How can we use the gifts of the collective to support whatever is needed? And when we have that opportunity to rest, what are the inspirations that come forward that maybe lead us? So in that Indigenous world, there's an understanding that women are the natural leaders, right? But it's a different kind of leadership. Sometimes it's visible, but a lot of time it's invisible. And it's leadership that comes from listening. It comes from a place of quiet. It comes from a place of waiting. And it comes from a place of being able to listen to life. You know, because women are the life givers, right? We're like the earth. We can, if we are given, and this is the big thing to say first, if women are given the space to grow into who they are, which includes the space to make our mistakes and come back from them, which includes bringing our voice forward, even in spaces where that voice might be contrary to how things are. But if women are given the space to grow into who they are and their natural gifts and capacities, our listening, our intuition, our dreaming abilities, that we can hear what life needs. And then the role of the men is to listen to the women and support that coming into action. And I think there's a lot of men who suffer because they don't know what to do, or they don't feel that they have meaning, or they don't feel that they're really, appreciated by the women that they're with. But the gift that the men are to bring is their honesty and their listening. And that together there's a beautiful partnership that happens when we can listen for what life needs and the men support that.
There is, I don't know if it's like really an established thing, but there is a type of like car racing where one person has the steering wheel and the other one has the gas and brake. Okay.
Oh, cool.
And I think it's more of like a novelty sideshow kind of thing. But what really comes to mind is that what if the person who, like, this is a clumsy metaphor, but bear with me here. Like, it's almost like if you're working together as a finely tuned team, right? and you each have a different skill and a different capability, I think it's really on all of us to listen to each other and be open to perspectives different. It's like maybe like you're partially colorblind and your other person is partially colorblind in a different way, and together you can make out all the colors. Like maybe you're just not seeing something the way that they can see it, and that's okay. That's not a deficit. What is actually really a defect and a deficit is not being able to listen to the person who can see things in a different way than you, right?
Yeah.
Have you ever heard the concept that why patriarchy is so resistant to change is that they are, and I say they, the people who are very pro-patriarchy are terrified that the other people are going to do to the patriarchy what the patriarchy does to other people?
Yeah. I would say that that's not just the patriarchy. I would say that's actually part of the human condition, where you're actually leading me into this piece that I do ultimately want to talk about.
Okay.
Which is, okay, so I'm a bit of a circular talker, right? So I go somewhere and come back, but I usually come back.
Oh, we this whole podcast, and you haven't heard this last episode yet, but we talked about it a little bit. I love tangents. I love randomness, and I feel like that variety is the thing, that diversity and variety in conversation is what makes conversation so fulfilling. So by all means, tangent, go out in different directions, circle back, do whatever you want to do, because that's what makes a conversation alive.
Okay, well, I could be like the queen of tangential exploration.
Go for it.
So anyway, but going back to what you had said about who are you, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a really amazing thing to have a sense of what that is. You know, I think it's layered and multifaceted and a journey that we won't get to the end to until probably our last breath. But it's a wonderful thing to have a sense of it enough that, you know, where I'm sitting, wow, there's a lot of joy in that. But the other thing is, it's really something to have one thing that you know for sure. There's one thing that I know for sure. And that's part of what I wanted to make sure we talked about a bit today. So I know for sure that all of life is a mirror. And everything that is on the outside is a reflection of what is on the inside, but hidden from us. Because if it weren't hidden from us, we wouldn't need the mirror to show us. And that mirror shows us both the dark, you know, or the things we would hide, but it also shows us the light. It also shows us the beauty of who we are that we might also have hidden. Right? So now I want to just go back to what exists in a feminine worldview. Valid information doesn't only come from research in a feminine worldview. Valid information can come intuitively. It can come through dreams. It can come through visions. It can come through a voice that talks to you in your ear. So I had an experience early in my most recent trip into education. I've been in and out a couple of times. And I was suddenly a school guidance counselor. Don't have the training, but I was hired by a former nun who was really good at listening to what life was calling for. And so I kind of fell ass backwards into a dream job, which was as a student services teacher, guidance resource teacher in a K-8 school. Anyway, I hadn't been there very long, and we had an event where 30 kids swarmed one girl and beat her up. She was in grade 8. And I didn't have a skill set about any of that stuff, but I was a healer, and I'm really good at sitting with people. Anyway, I got a phone call at 4:30 in the evening, or just after school, saying, "Hey, Jen, this happened. We're going to be having conversations tomorrow. I want you in early. We've got to figure out as a team how we respond to this. This is what's happened. And I was like, okay, well, okay. But I was a little bit in shock and kind of hung up the phone going, wow, I have no idea what you do about that. And then I got another phone call at 2:30 in the morning from a teacher who had 27 of those kids in her class. And she was enraged. And she was enraged, I think, at feeling helpless and powerless. And how did this happen when we've been talking about, respect and how we look after each other and building community for a month? It was early in the school year. And she said, and you're my guidance counselor, and what are you going to do about it? And I was like, I don't know, but I promise I will be there at 6:45 in the morning, and I will stay and sit until we know what to do. And I hung up the phone going, oh my God, I have no idea what you do. But it's 2:30 in the morning, and I just laid back, and I was out in moments. And I woke up with a dream. And this dream, I was early yet in my experience in Indigenous community, but it was a dream of a walk around the 4 directions, the east, the south, the west, and the north. And each direction had a task of what you were to do. And in the beginning, the person being taken on the walk was going to be someone who was crazy reactive and emotional, upset, upset at someone. There was a task in the east, a task in the south, a task in the west, and a task in the north. And the dream said, you follow these tasks. By the time they finish in the north, the reactivity will be gone. And the situation will be resolved. Anyway, so that's what I woke up with, this flash of a dream that showed me all this. So I go to school and I'm like, oh my God, this is the only thing I have, but I don't know. Hopefully nobody asks me for anything. So anyway, we sit in, we have this meeting, and everyone else talks first. And then just before the bell, the principal says, so Jen, we decided that we would do a full day retreat with all these kids, teaching them about social emotional learning. I can't even remember what else, restitution type concepts. That was a thing taught in our school division back then. And then she was like, so Jen, what are you going to bring forward? And I was like, I had this dream that said these things, and that when someone starts, they're like this, and by the time they're done, they're like that. But I have no idea if it works. And she said, good, great. You're going to have groups for 45 minutes each. You're going to have groups of 6 cycling through, and you do that. And I was in shock, and I was sick to my stomach, to be honest. I went back to my office. I think I was rocking in a corner. Anyway, then there's a knock at my door. It's my principal. Hi, Jen. Here's the young lady that we were talking about this morning, right? The girl who was beaten up. Her mother is removing her from our school today, but I have her mom's permission for you to sit with her for an hour. And then she said to me quietly, you have 1 hour for her to leave in peace. And I think she saw the struck look in my eyes. And she said, you might want to try that thing. And she closed the door. Well, so we sat there and I said, okay, we're going to do a thing. We'll figure it out as we go a little bit. But we did these tasks. And the first task was to describe the people she was reactive to. So she said, they betrayed me. Absolutely, they did. There's a whole setup that has to do with the 7-Eleven, actually. This young woman was new to the school. She hadn't had, she wasn't connecting with other kids. A lot of kids didn't like her for some reason. The word was that she was kind of, promiscuous with the boys. So the boys were all up in arms and the girls were all up in arms and everyone didn't like her. So they said, oh, hey, a couple of girls went to her and said, we noticed people aren't hanging out with you, and maybe, come and get a Slurpee with us. We're going to go to 7-Eleven. So she was really happy. Away she went with them. They got their Slurpees. And then they said to her, oh, hey, there's something going on back here. Come look. And there were 28 kids waiting for her. And then everything else ensued, and she was quite hurt. So she said, they betrayed me. Absolutely. The second part, and there's a lot to this part, but all it was at that moment was to rewrite that sentence using I. So she rewrote, I betray me. I betrayed me. And I was just thinking, okay, I've not been in this job too long, but it'll probably be about 3 more minutes and I'm going to get walked out of the building, right? Because who in their right mind would ever suggest to someone who's been hurt like that, that they're at fault in some way? But this is what the dream said, so I followed, right? Listen and follow, feminine way of being. And so I asked her, I said, how does that sentence, strike you? And she was quiet, but she was this most amazing young woman. I never met her before because I was new, she was new. I didn't even know the junior high kids. And she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, I did betray me. And I was like, what are you talking about? How could you possibly have, look at what happened. They were all there. That was a setup. And she said, no. She said, there's a reason why people didn't like me. She said, at my last school, I had trouble, with kids and bullying. So I decided that they probably wouldn't like me for who I was. So she said, I put on a personality, and I said that I was something that I'm not. And because she wasn't that, the boys who were all excited then became very angry. The girls who wanted the attention of the boys were very angry, and it just became a whole cross-grade bullying thing. But in the most amazing way, she actually was able to land in, yes, there's a truth here. And it doesn't negate that they betrayed her, right? And that's another thing about a feminine way, right? We can hold more than one thing as true without having to get rid of the other one. So she could hold, yes, they betrayed me, but yes, there's a story that's just about me in this. And that's really where the crux of this teaching is. So she was able to land in it. And there was a sense in her body. I don't know if you know what I call it a belly drop. It's like when you land in something that's true, even if it's uncomfortable, something that's true feels better than like an ugly truth or a difficult truth actually feels better than a pretty lie.
Yeah, it's a sense of relief, I think.
Yeah. Anyway, so she did that. And then in the West, there's a different a piece that helps to bring resolution to the reasons why that, which I won't get into because it's whatever. And then in the North, you look at those positive mirrors, right? Those parts of light. And I'm laughing because the sun's coming in my window now. And I'm starting to glow from light and a little bit of warmth. Anyway, and she talked about the people that she admires. And she said she loves to read. She writes the most beautiful poetry. And she really knows who she is. So we mirrored those sentences again. I love to read. She goes, oh, that's true. I really love to read. I write the most beautiful poetry. Oh, she goes, I don't actually tell people, but I write poetry all the time at night. I really know who I am. And she was like, I actually do really know who I am. I'm not the girl that I came here being. And she was like, I can't wait for my first day, at my new school. Because she said, I'm going to be me. And the people who are for me will appreciate me. And the ones that don't, that's fine. They're not for me. And it worked out that she left in peace, which was shocking and amazing that it worked. And then I was asked to walk the same process with the 30 kids who beat her up. And the same kind of transformation happened in about 45 minutes with all but one of those kids. And the thing that those kids said back to me, the loudest response was, why has no adult ever told me that if I hate somebody, that it's a reflection of a part of me that I haven't been able to be okay with? And who can help me resolve that?
I think that's applicable too to a lot of our like social political conflicts right now.
Yep, it sure is. It's actually the whole reason why those women sent me your invitation and why I responded, because this is much more than, oh, Jen has a business and does a thing. Like I don't have a single reference actually on my website or my Instagram or anything about this work. And this is why I'm here. It goes back to that thing. There's lots of teachers, but not many healers. Well, guess what? There's a lot of healers that can teach healing in various ways, but there's no one that has this particular walk. And I remember the first time someone said to me something about a mirror, and I'd had my healing practice already. I was going away for a couple of weeks, and one of my clients said, oh, why don't you just give your practice to this guy for a couple of weeks and have him see all your clients so that nobody misses an appointment? And I was a little hesitant about that. And she was like, oh, you don't want to do that because you don't like him, which isn't really how I felt, but that's where she went. And she said, you don't like him because he's a mirror for you. And I was like, oh, what does that mean? And she said, I don't know, but you don't like him because he's a mirror for you. And I felt shame with that. And I honestly wanted to punch her out, right? For kind of putting that on me and not have, so what do I do with this? And I looked for it for a long time, even in those ceremony circles, that mirror teaching. And I found some parts of it, but not something that can help walk to resolution like that girl and those kids did.
I think it's also valid to accept that if you're cooking, like you say you're cooking a stew, right? And you have to step out for a minute and you're going to say, hey, can you keep cooking this for me, without knowing the ingredients, and they're just going to drop their plan in the middle of it. Is it still going to taste the same?
I don't exactly know where you're going with that.
Well, it says, this person who would be taking over your practice shortly.
Oh, yeah.
Like it's not necessarily even a control thing or, you're a mirror or something like that. There's also something to be said about like, hey, I'm doing all this work and you're about to put a bunch of ingredients that are an unknown quantity into my work. Is this going to reset me? Is this going to pull me back in progress? Is this going to oversalt the soup, so to speak, Yeah.
And that's a totally valid point. But what happened in that story is that she planted a seed in me of curiosity. What do you mean, Amir? What's that about? Because I used to not like a whole lot of people. I've become a far less judgmental, polarized kind of person than I used to be. And a whole lot has come through that work. So that dream was like 23 years ago. And that walk has become really core to my healing practice over these years. And when I turned 51, this one day I was sitting in quiet and a voice came to me And she said, I want to stay here after you leave. And I knew the voice to be the same voice that was in that dream that did that walk and showed it to me. So who am I? Why am I here? I think that living in these times of polarity and political polarity, even violent political polarity that we're living in, our world needs ideas and practices that come from a feminine way. And this is one. A practice and a walk that can walk most people from high intense reactivity to not only neutralizing of that reactivity, even grateful for that reactivity. And very often the outside circumstance changes when people do this kind of a process. So go ahead.
Oh, I was about to say something that seems to be a common theme in all of these stories, right? Really speaks to a strength that I feel that you have. Where, and I'm looking at my notes here because this one's actually going back to one of the first things I wrote down.
Okay.
I wrote down a question to ask you about, do you learn new things from your clients? And one of the things that you've answered that question a dozen times at this point, and I feel like it speaks to a strength that you have a willingness to learn alongside the people that you're helping learn. It's not just you getting up on a soapbox and preaching this direction for them to go. It sounds like you go along on this journey with them, and I think that's really important to recognize.
Well, a feminine way would also have us walk with I don't know, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. But when we take those journeys together, whatever they are, when we meet people and make relationship and become changed by who each other is and how we impact each other, yeah, it's a natural outcome. But thank you for the compliment.
Yeah, and it's interesting too. I go back to your 4 Directions story, the dream, right?
Yeah.
The willingness, and this is something I think is a good life lesson for people, the willingness that they had to entertain that as a possibility. I feel like the concept of why not is incredibly empowering. And sometimes it succeeds and sometimes it fails. But if you don't try, you can't succeed. And the ability to just give people the trust to let them try, let them learn, let them maybe not succeed every time. And it allows and encourages, I think, growth. But also I think it's so empowering and builds up the people around you as a team.
Yeah, absolutely. And it softens that, that curse of perfection, right? Gotta have it all right is also a masculine way. We learn so much on the journeys and in not knowing and in the mistakes that we make. It's worth its weight in gold.
One of my earlier guests, Brown, brought
Yes.
this up. The whole reason why we ended up connecting is something she posted, and it was this concept of not being allowed to be seen learning. To have to arrive fully baked with all of the answers ready to go. And the idea that it's more important to be able to show that learning process, right?
Yeah.
And I think all of that kind of ties in together. The encouragement of why not, the willingness to learn and not just be someone who is, for lack of a better term, professing this idea in a unilateral direction.
Yeah.
And it is atypical of what we see in a lot of this structured learning that we have in Western society. And I think there's a lot of value to examining if that's really the best way to do things.
Yeah. Well, I think it can also be a bit of a fallacy that we all know where we're going, right? Truth is, we don't have a hot clue, and that's okay. You know what? If I go back to that voice that I heard saying, I want to stay here after you leave, all I know that means in my heart is this teaching wants to have her own legs and have her own existence when mine's done. And so that's becoming my walk for, I don't know, the next 25 years-ish. And I've been listening for, what does even saying this out loud look like? And in this moment, in this little way, that's what it is. And I'm really grateful for the opportunity to speak of this teaching out loud.
I'm grateful you brought it. I feel like it was a very fruitful conversation too. And a lot of people need to hear it, because a lot of people just get this idea of the rigidity of there's only one way, or there's only a couple of ways forward, when in reality, like you were saying, you don't know where you're going, but you have an idea of where you'd like to be. And who says you have to take this exact straight line to get there? That's
right. And who would have ever guessed that I'd be sitting on a podcast with a kind, secure male in another country talking about this teaching? I wouldn't have guessed that little pathway.
I mean, to be fair, though, I've spent a lot of time in Canada, and I feel like as a society, my home state, Minnesota, where I'm at right now, is more like Toronto and Ontario, I should say, at large, not just the greater Toronto area. It feels like we're more of an Ontario than the rest of the United States. So I feel like there's a kinship in our societies. So it's not, I don't know where the hell I was going with this, other than to just bring up, I feel like that you're not, your way of thinking isn't very alien to me. It seems it's a lot of familiarity with some of the stuff I got, because we have a common, like you said, your people are from Sweden, and mine are mostly from Sweden and Norway, and so are a lot of the people here. And I feel like that way of thinking, I don't know where I was going with this, but I feel like a familiarity with that, I guess.
Well, and we're both Billy Joel fans.
True. I think we were talking about that.
My ass off. When you were asking for some information before, on that initial email or whatever it was. And I was like, my intuition feels like saying, oh, and I'm a Billy Joel fan, and Summer Highland Falls from Turnstiles is my favorite song. And I thought, why? What is one? Where is that coming from? And I just deleted it. And I laughed so hard when you were in your podcast, Squeezing Lemons.
Yes, and we were talking about how I play the stranger every time taxes are done.
Yeah, laughed my butt off. It was great.
Oh, Scenes from an Italian Restaurant is amazing for that. It's a bit of, I don't know why, there's something actually, like The Stranger, the title song off that album, there's something like, it feels restorative. You know what I mean?
And that Summer Highland Falls, it came into my soul. We were driving through the Rockies, and the movement on the piano was the exact same as the beat of the trees as we went by, and it was just magical. Anyway,
it's amazing that the synchronization sometimes of music and mood and location. Like my wife and I had that happen in Iceland. So we landed, we rented this older truck that it only had a CD player. Mm-hmm. And we made the decision, it's weird. Without getting into the details, you can rent older vehicles that are a little scratched and banged, and you can take them and do fun, adventurous things with them. But again, this thing only had a CD player, and we brought our phones, and we had our music libraries on our phones, and we thought we're both pretty significant music nerds. She's so much more knowledgeable about music than I am. Not even close. Like that, it's not even in the same ballpark, but we share a common interest in consuming the music as well. So we went into a used record shop, and we bought all of these CDs. We just there's a couple we were looking for, like Sigur Rós and Bjork and stuff like that. But I'm the bold person who goes up and talks to everyone. So I asked the guy at the record store, like the clerk, what would you recommend? And I'm saying, I don't want American pop music. I literally want to get the feeling of Icelandic music in Iceland when we're driving around, and he was tickled by this, and he started going off, and we left. We literally had a stack of CDs, and I suppose this is an audio format, so you can't really see it. We had a stack of CDs a foot high, and that's a third of a meter for people who use a functional measuring system. And we were listening to what's his name, like Halimar, Amabadama, stuff like that. All this like beautiful Icelandic music while driving the fjords, and there was just this synchronization of place and music and mood and everything, and it was just wonderful. And now, like, when I listen to some of those songs, I feel like I'm back in a fjord.
Yeah, music lives in that feminine world too. The heart and the spirit of it is that feminine part, right?
Yes, and you haven't listened to the last episode, so we talked about this a little bit.
Oh, cool.
Not within the lens of masculinity and femininity, but the idea that when the Bible says we were created in God's image, right? I don't think that's literal. My personal feeling is not that it's literal. What singular thing do we have in common with our Creator is the drive to create for the sake of creation. And I think art is in everybody. It really is. It is one of the most core human things. And whether you consider it quality or not, the notion that I want to create something, I want to carve something out of wood, I want to draw something, I want to paint something, I want to sing something, I want to do something, I want to make something, is so core to the vivid, like, fulfilled human experience.
Yeah. And that's who you are talking.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's, like, who am I?
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing that's driving that.
And often it's talking in a language that's completely universal, outside of like written word and storytelling. Yeah. There are so many ways that art is beyond language and maybe is a representation of what we had before language, And I feel like it is so core to our being,
Yeah. I wish people could hear my nodding. I'm like nodding, but no one else has a cue about that.
I'm so happy that you did most of the talking in this episode, because I guess I've been talking since 7 a.m. this morning, training people, and my voice is fried. Like, I have literally been talking nonstop. I'm gonna like go eat lozenges like candy after this. This happens every time. Part of what I do for a living is I train people, and there are times where I come home and I get off that airplane and I do not have a voice left. And today is very close to that. So I really appreciate you doing the heavy lifting on the talking for the majority of this episode too.
Well, you're welcome.
So I do have one question I want to ask. Like, I stand as a point of pride that I've never had to use all 10 questions. The conversations take off. I'm looking at the counter right now. We've been doing this for an hour and a half. We haven't touched we used one question essentially, and that was your thoughts on what does it mean, to you, masculinity and femininity. Mm-hmm. We've used one question. I love that. So far, unbroken streak. But there is one question that I do want to ask you, and it's sort of the closest thing to a mandatory question I have is the statement that women want to be heard as an incomplete sentence. How would you finish it?
Okay. I actually have this typed out in front of me.
All right.
Okay. Women want to be heard, and the possibilities that lie within our way of being are what this world needs right now for our recovery, our healing, and the reclamation of a world that is healthy, bountiful, and kind. I would define femininity as a principle, not necessarily about women, but about a way of being that is inclusive, intuitive, or experience-led, where the seemingly impossible is a regular occurrence, where all people and all life is treated in a way that says you matter, and so do your gifts, your dreams, your aspirations, your purpose, and your life story. I believe we all have the potential to live from this feminine principle and create a world of incredibly helpful possibilities.
I like that. And what I really like too is that so far there has been no real consensus on how to end that statement. And it really, in my last guest, again, you're going to hear all this when you catch up. My last guest made the statement that women have a lot of commonality, and a lot of women are alike in a lot of respects, but no, it's not a monolithic concept of being a woman. There's so many different ways that manifests in people, and I'm loving the diversity of the answers to that question.
I would love to add just on that part that you said. I think that if men aren't stuck in their hierarchy place, I think that who they are, serving as equals with us, they become equally multifaceted.
I agree. I absolutely agree. Now I'm trying to remember, there was one thing that you said, and I wanted to come back to that before we left. It was in your answer.
Okay. And women want to be heard?
Yes, and I'm kicking myself because I didn't write it down.
Possibilities, recovery, healing, bountiful, kind.
Yes, there it is. I love this. My brain as I age is not my friend. It is okay. Not, the memory does not work, and I literally have to write things down so I don't lose, because your answer went into so many different ways that my brain just went, I don't need this question anymore. So thank you for giving me some breadcrumbs back to this.
Welcome.
One of the things I've said with the mess that we're in, we need to do something different than we've been doing. And I think for the last several thousand years, we have been insisting that men have the answer. Mm-hmm. I don't necessarily think that's true. And I don't think that women exclusively have the answer either.
Agreed.
I think that it's going to take both of us learning, more so men, learning how to communicate with each other. Mm-hmm. But as far as the actual plan to get us out of this mess, I feel like that's primarily going to be found after men accept women in leadership positions. I think women hold the key to moving forward. And whether that be a singular, like women only have the answer, I don't know. But I feel like women are the key.
I totally agree with you. And if we take that way step back view of thousands of years of one way, well, it's a pendulum swing. And ultimately, we've been both places, and it's time for us to come to another place again. And there's nothing in some ways wrong with where we are in that big progression, right? But in the small up close look, I completely agree with you. Mm-hmm. There's two things that I've been involved with. One just these last few days, the other one a couple of years ago. These last few days, sitting with women who are involved within a child and family services organization, but this organization is led by Indigenous matriarchs. And the things that they're doing are not only captivating, but they are healing and transformative for these women, where these women aren't being, shunned, judged for the struggles that they deal with. And of course, there's that whole colonization lens of why things are as they are. But to hear one of those matriarchs stand before these women and say, we are not here to take your children away. Your children are a gift from the Creator, and they chose you as their parents. We are here to support you, to grow into, to heal and grow into your potential, so you can stand fully in your place as that caregiver. And the focus that these women have on healing and culture and traditional teachings, and the sanctity of life, the sanctity of children, the sanctity of these women was amazing and a beautiful to watch. They're so shifting their perspective that they've shifted their name from being, Anishinaabe Child and Family Services to Anishinaabe Bematiswin, an Indigenous way of living, the good life. Anyway, big shout out to them because what they're doing is amazing.
Sounds like it.
But 2 years ago, so I've been part of Sundance community within that indigenous ceremonial world. And I was part of a Sundance of women that was led by a grandmother. Her husband is well known in the community as a holy man, and he has led Sundances for years and years. And when his wife had that vision that she was to hold a Sundance, with the teaching of it being, it was about women in leadership with men supporting. And the whole 4 years were dedicated to inviting that feminine spirit here on the earth and helping us make that shift,
Yep.
Yeah.
I think that's the way forward. I really do.
Yeah. And you men are so important. You're so important. One of your other questions, what would you do if there were no men for a day? I would miss my husband. He is a good man. He is a secure man. I come from a family of a lot of gentle men. My grandpa, the roughest thing I ever heard him say was, "What the hell's the matter with you? Don't you know how to get along with people?" And, you men, your honesty, your goodness, your listening, those are the things that we need from you. And, offer that to us. And there's a richness in what you'll receive back.
And I'm going to add on to that too. I think we are not going to see our full potential and strength until we learn to find it from inside of here. Yeah. And not from elsewhere, to find that sense of security, that inner strength needs to be present. That's the foundation. It doesn't matter how strong externally you are, or what you can lift, or what you can hit, and what you can kill. Yeah. I think that is a projection of weakness. Mm-hmm. And the other, it has to come from an inner strength before that external strength can be harnessed to make the world a better place. And I think there's a place for masculine strength, like genuine masculine strength, not just emotionally, but physically. But it has to be coupled with an inner strength. It has to be pushed forward from a place of wanting to make the world better. And if you want to be a protector, be the kind of person that people don't need protection from.
Yeah. Nobody could hear all my nodding. I nodded all through everything you said. Yeah. That strength by itself is a danger, right?
It's like somebody going full throttle in the car, but not looking out the window. There's no direction to it. It's a liability.
Yeah.
But when it's directed by that inner strength, I think it can be such a massive asset for society as well as for yourself.
Yeah. I love good men. I am surrounded by them, appreciate them, and there's a real safety. If you want to know what has women feel really safe, is feeling that support and protection that is grounded in listening to who we are and what we need from what we tell you.
I think it's important too, and this is going to be, so far right now I'm at about 20% of my listenership being men. And I hope this gets out to more men than that. But I feel like men need to be exposed to this experience right here. This is what feminism looks like. Feminism is not a bunch of women hating men. Feminism is women saying, we need to have a seat at the same table.
Yeah.
We need to not just have a seat at that table to be present, but we need to have a hand on the steering wheel of society as well.
Yeah. And a foot on the brake.
Yes. Yes. Thank you for circling back on that. But I feel like that you don't want to be left aside to an advisory position the same way we wouldn't want to be left aside to a simple advisory position or just along for the ride. You want to be, like my wife and I let's circle back again, like my wife and I switching off every 30 minutes to make this trip, and just like we were being stubborn about it, but damn it, we were going to meet that challenge as warriors, and nobody was essentially just a passenger. And I feel like that's what feminism is, and men just on the whole do not understand that, and we need to.
Well, it would be helpful, right? Because if you don't, what's going to ultimately happen is that the masculine will destroy itself and the feminine will be what's left.
Yes. And I make jokes about things
right?
like movies. I refer to the movie Mean Girls as a documentary frequently. Mm-hmm. And just for the sake of illustration, but I'm going to do the same with Highlander, right?
Okay.
I feel like we are going towards this competitive. When you boil down competitiveness to its most simple elements, the only natural conclusion of a fiercely competitive dynamic is that there can be only one. Mm-hmm. So is that what we're really trying to do? Are we trying to be at each other's throats and hold each other back and eliminate each other? Wouldn't we move forward and all of us benefit so much more if we could stop being at each other's throats? Yeah. Why the competitiveness? What's our goal with this, And
who wants the lonely end game?
No kidding.
Right? Like where's the end?
It's you'd burn the world down to be the king of the ashes. Like, what's the point?
Beautifully said.
I stole that from someplace. I don't remember where it is. I can't take credit for it, but I wish I could. But yeah, I mean, I've heard that like some men want to burn the world down to be the king of the ashes. And I feel that statement. I feel that's what's happening now.
Yeah. And from the ashes, something will emerge.
Right. Well, if you go into nature,
that's right.
Forest fires serve a tremendous purpose because the ashes provide nutrients to the soil for new growth.
Yeah. And that's the feminine, right? The ashes, that's the feminine. What's left? There you go.
I feel like that's metaphorical too, is that women have an overall knack for being able to somehow, after everything's gone to crap, be the ones who are stuck with figuring it all out when people think it's impossible. Women are the ones largely that have been able to go, well, we have to move forward somehow. And the onus has been on them to figure it out. But the thing is they do it. And what's really frustrating is that they don't get credit for it.
It is frustrating. But, the other option is that the masculine principle can awaken and stop themselves, mm-hmm. Slow themselves, stop and listen.
And I'll say this again, just in case this hasn't sunk in. If you want to be that protector, if you want to really be that protector, you have to start with being the kind of person that people don't need protection from.
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyways, I'm looking at the counter now. We have almost been at this 2 hours, so it might be time to stop.
Yeah.
And again, I really want to thank you for this has been a really amazing conversation, and it gave me a lot to think about, especially now I'm going to be thinking about who am I? Like, who am I? Like, who am I? Not just like, oh, hey, I'm me. Like, who am I? Why am I here? That's interesting food for thought. So thank you for that.
You're welcome. Thanks for what you're bringing to the world.
You're welcome for that too. This has been a big experiment, and I'm really happy that people want to come along on this journey with me, because I didn't know if this was going to go anywhere, and it's actually starting to go someplace. And I'm really, really happy that that message is getting out to people, not just my thoughts and opinions, but the idea that through me as a surrogate listener, these people are getting exposed to everyone else's perspectives, and hopefully new ones. I mean, there's so many I can go back to, but yeah, I mean, even from this one, you kind of blew my mind with that "who am I" thing.
Well, happy to, I don't know, be of service.
Well, I mean, if it expands who I am as a person, like I said, I think I'm going to meet myself at the end of my life, and then I'll know who I am, because I will be able to look back and say that's who I was. But to expand my potential with that thought, I really appreciate that.
Cool. Thanks so much.
Well, thank you, and I will talk to you later.
Okay. Sounds good.
Bye.
Bye.
Something I'd like to tag on to the end of this episode, as I'm getting used to a lot of these new people listening and having this many people listening, is that I would really appreciate it if you would go onto your various podcast streaming platforms and leave me a review and a comment. That kind of thing bumps us up in the algorithm quite a bit. And if you want other people to hear this, please help us out and go do so. And again, thank you to all you new listeners for coming in and listening to this podcast.